Hey everyone, welcome to the saltwater version of the weekly update. I'm standing in front of this stand and canopy quite intently because I wanted you guys to see a new design that we've done with columns. This is designed for a Red Sea tank. A lot of people love the open top concept with tanks, and this allows you to have the open top. The Red Sea slides in from the back. But if you do have a situation where fish are jumping and things like that, and at some point in time in an open top tank you're going to have that situation, this actually frames it in so that you can display it this way, or it's actually set to where you can display it this way, like a full piece of furniture. The doors open on the front so you can easily feed your fish, but the columns frame it in, and if you look at it from the sides, it's all boxed in as if it's one piece. The top does come off. It takes two people to lift it off, but it is a really cool new design by La Rochelle Designs, and it's the first one we've done for a large Red Sea reef tank. So if you have a Red Sea tank, or you want a Red Sea tank, something that's a little different, or an open top tank, but you're like, how can the canopy, or why would the canopy even need to be put on it? This shows you a really cool way of where you can display it both ways, but with having the whole design of having it as a piece of furniture. So I wanted to show you that before we got started, and we will get right into the update. One other thing real quick that I want to tell you before we get into the fish is bristleworm traps did come in this week. I've been trying to get them for about a month now. It's been very difficult. If you have a reef tank, at some point in time you're going to have an issue with bristleworms. Maybe, maybe not. But for the most part, for a lot of the accounts I have, bristleworms are a constant menace to a lot of different types of corals. This is a great way to try to keep them under control. Every tank is different. Every quantity of bristleworms in a tank is going to be different, but at least the big ones can easily go into this and can't get back out. Very easy way to bait them. Doesn't detract from the look of the tank just to have it in there or back in some of the rocks. But if you're having what could possibly be an issue with bristleworms, I've got your answer finally. Okay, as I said the last 2 weeks, the selection and everything that's coming in is just off the charts right now. We're getting a lot of different fish from a lot of different places, and the quality, health, and everything looks really good. Reagan's got some phenomenal fish this week. We're going to get right into them. First up is the powder brown tang. This is a very popular tang. The last two we've had, we've sold pretty much in an hour of having it. This one actually made it through the first day. It's already relaxed and swimming around. Also known as the white cheek tang. It is part of the same family that you get your Achilles tang, your powder blue. They can be rather ick prone, so you do need to kind of watch that. I would say it's definitely an intermediate fish. It's not one for the beginner, but it's also not really difficult. You don't have to be an advanced aquarist at all to have one. It is good to put these tangs in fairly kind of in the beginning of your tank, just because they're less affected by other fish once they've been able to establish their own dominance, but a great fish. Okay, we got an Antenata lionfish in this week. Lionfish have kind of been scarce, which is ironic to me because they seem to be everywhere in the world's oceans, but right now we haven't been able to get a whole lot of them in. This is a kind of a dwarf species, the Antenata. It's more of a rock-dwelling species. It stays very close to the reef, not out in the open water, kind of like a volatan will. Really cool and a great size. Not a super expensive fish, but a super showy fish. This is a gorgeous blue jaw triggerfish. He is right at the size and age where that blue eye comes in. The yellow on this one's fins is super sharp. All the markings are beautiful. The weight of this fish is beautiful. This is one of the few technically reef-safe triggerfish. Now, I would tell you there's no such thing as a reef-safe triggerfish, but in terms of one that you can get away with a lot of times until it gets really big, this is one that a lot of aquarists go for because it is very tolerant of invertebrates. It is very, very tolerant of other fish. It is not a super highly aggressive triggerfish. New squareback Anthias came in this week. We sold the one from last week. As I've said many times, this is an ocean perch. It is a fish that typically comes in and after the first day has no problem staying out. It doesn't even hide from the camera. It's very relaxed. It stays out front. It is a great fish for a peaceful reef tank. They feed readily, and it is a fairly long-lived species in the hobby. It is probably my number one. That and the sunburst anthias are probably my number one, number two anthias for a reef aquarium. Coming out in front as well is the powder blue tang. Now, we just talked about the powder brown, and this is probably the most popular, other than the Achilles, of this species of tang. Very, very beautiful. You don't get colors like this pretty much in any other fish that's in the ocean on the level of that soft pastel look all throughout the body. This too is a fairly ick-prone fish, so you need to have a little bit of experience before trying to keep one, I think. But it is typically a hardy species of tang. Readily comes in feeding most times that it comes in, and all over a good fish. One of my top 5 in the hobby is the fox-faced rabbitfish. Why? Because it always comes in very hardy. They're very difficult to kill. They're very adaptable to almost any type of saltwater fish environment, whether it's a reef tank, even if it's an aggressive tank. Fox-faced rabbitfish are just a great all-over fish. They are fairly spastic and they will hide in the beginning, but once they become accustomed to the tank and their surroundings, they're out, they feed readily, and they're very long-lived. I like to show these every time we get them in just because they do so well, the yellow mimic tang. They are a fast-selling tang. The mustard color, the look on the body, they don't ever seem to come in looking the same. There's always different markings on each one, making it, each fish a very personable type of fish. They're very beautiful. They add a lot of color. They have beautiful fin work. They're not very expensive. They are very hardy, very adaptable tangs. Got a little more aggressive tank. We got in a Bursa trigger. This is kind of a companion to the Picasso trigger in that it has very, very similar markings, with the one exception being the very large dot toward the lower back behind the pectoral fins. Beautiful blue around the mouth kind of separates it as well, but it is an aggressive species of trigger. Very few fish are as beautiful as the emperor angel. This is a small emperor that got really good weight. It still has a little remnants of its juvenile colors underneath the adult colors. It's, like I said, it's very hard pressed to get a more beautiful fish than this. While it is not reef safe, it is reef tolerable. There are a lot of corals that you can keep with this fish. I have one in a customer's account that has been in there for a couple of years that has done fantastic, with some stony corals and some soft corals, proving that it is possible. But regardless, it's a great fish for any type of tank. If you've got a predatory tank or you have an aggressive tank, this greenbird wrasse is a wonderful fish to have in there. They move around a lot, they stay around a lot, they're super hardy, they're very long-lived, and they're very active, so they also add a lot of activity to a tank. Not so good for a reef aquarium, not so good for a super peaceful tank, as they are part of the Thalassoma family, which is a group of fairly aggressive meat-eating wrasses. But it is a lot of color. They get a nice blue and green sheen the older that they get. A wonderful fish. Maybe what you need is a little snowflake eel for your tank. As you can see with this orange shoulder tang swimming around them, snowflakes are not a very aggressive type of moray. They have kind of molars in their mouth instead of the viper-like teeth that a lot of gymnothorax have. They are very adaptable in a small tank or a large tank with just regular fish. It's very, very rare, unless they get really, really big, that they're going to mess with other fish and things like that. They will, however, chomp down on things like crabs and shrimp, which make up their diet. So in most cases, unless you have a very small one, we recommend that you don't keep them with a lot of invertebrates. Here's one of the most popular other tangs that we stock. This is the orange tipped or flame tipped mini tang. This is another very hardy species of tang. It is part of the Tinochetus family. What makes them unique is their V-shaped mouth, and they typically run from rock to rock, eating whatever they can find off of it. I wouldn't sell them as an algae control, but they do control some just by the natural virtue of how they feed in an aquarium. They adapt to almost any type of fish environment as long as they've got enough size on them to be adaptable. Great fish. In my opinion, the most colorful fish in all of saltwater is the Mandarin dragonette. I think it's phenomenally beautiful, and I think if it got bigger than it does, it'd be the only fish we sold. Great fish. You do have to feed it live copepods, so it does have a specialty diet. However, in a dense packed reef tank where you've got a lot of live rock or a lot of copepod life, this can be a great fish. They move fairly slowly through and out the rocks, but when they make an appearance, what an appearance it is. It is probably, again, one of the most beautiful fish we sell. It is not a very expensive fish, something to definitely check out. Diamond gobies are back in stock this week. If you need a sand sifting gobi, you can watch this little guy as he picks up sand and shifts it through his gill plates to try to find food. This is a great fish from a personality standpoint, from an appearance standpoint, and just from an overall compatibility standpoint. It's also one of the hardier gobies that we sell. They tend to do very well in service. Fish tend to leave them alone. Obviously, I don't recommend you put them in with triggerfish, things like that, but in a reef environment or an invertebrate environment, it's a must. Wow, check out these blue reef chromis. Really, really sharp blue on black contrast. This is a reef chromis. They will school if the tank is big enough. Beautiful, beautiful fish. Beautiful urchins came in this week, and while I don't really suggest them for a small aquarium, just because they knock things over, they can be really great in a large tank. Just to have something that's constantly moving in there and something that's really different to have in there. We have several different types of urchins, pencil urchins, pincushion urchins, and I think there's even one or two, let's see, tuxedo urchins, yeah. And that's what you're looking at right now is the tuxedo urchin. Really beautiful also that we have the small pajama cardinals in mass this week. They're in a perfect size to go in just about any tank. They're an extremely hardy fish, and while they're not as colorful as some fish, in a group they make an outstanding feature. They will stay huddled together in most cases, which gives them an overall appearance of you having a schooling fish that you can get in a fairly small tank. Beautiful Sailfin Tang, also one of my top fish for any tank. Just absolutely hardy, adaptable in almost any situation. This is one of the easiest fish to keep in salt water, and it is also one of the most long-lived. Pintail Fairy Rat came in this week. This is as beautiful as any wrasse that we've gotten in a very, very long time. The caudal tail on the very back looks just like a calligraphy, the tip of a calligraphy pen. The colors are all different pastel mixed together. It's just a gorgeous fish. If you want a very peaceful reef wrasse that is very hardy, we have one in our main tank that Hayden can literally pick up when he feeds them. This is a beautiful, beautiful fish. Okay, so Hayden wasn't messing around when he told me I had to show corals this week. Check these out. A fox coral. Coral that you don't see propagated very much, and I've been wanting one for a while. We used to get them all the time back in the day, but it's a beautiful bouquet of gelatinous tissue. How do you like that? It's a very, very cool, very slender coral, so it can kind of slide in nooks and crannies, but a great coral nonetheless, which I love and that we don't have too terribly often. Right next I have a small bubble coral, which very rarely I have. This bubble coral is really, really cool because it almost has highlighted bubbles, as you can see, almost what look like eye slits of a snake, that almost also have like an orange sheen to them. So a very cool, very different bubble from what we're used to having. The creme de la creme of what came in the corals, which we very rarely have, is Cattleophelia, also known as the elegance coral. This is a specifically, quote unquote, a splatter elegance coral, but very, very beautiful. Probably one of the most showy corals I think you can put in an aquarium. It is not a beginner coral, but it's also not an advanced coral either. It's kind of intermediate as far as how easy it is to keep, but very, very beautiful. Hayden did a great job with this one. The pearl coral, very, very cool, very, very similar to the fox coral, but a lot more of it. You see green hammers all the time. Very rarely do you see orange hammers. We got in two this week. finally got some Goniopora frogs. I got the regular, which you can see here, which are the full flower pots, and some of the micro Goniopora, which are, as the name says, it's a lot smaller flower pots, but ready to go. Thank you guys for paying attention. Your question for the week is, what kind of eel did I show in this video? Yes, I know it was the same question as last week, and you're not going to believe this, but the answer's the same as well. So this should be very easy. Thank you for tuning in. Have a wonderful week. Come see us. So much is happening. I showed only a fraction of the fish, and but that's it. God bless. Have a great week. I'll see you back next week.